On May 30th, 2023, Elizabeth Holmes walked into a minimum security federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas. And the weirdest part is how quiet that moment must have been. No dramatic music, no Silicon Valley stage lights, no magazine covers, just a gate closing behind the woman who once convinced the world she could change medicine with a single drop of blood. And I want you to sit with that contrast for a second. Because a few years earlier, she wasn't treated like a criminal. She was treated like a miracle, like the future showed up early. And her name was on it. And here's the scary part. It wasn't just random people on the internet who believed her. It was investors, billionaires, executives, powerful board members, major partners, people whose entire job is to not fall for something like this. So how did it happen? How did one startup become a $9 billion legend, while the core product didn't actually work the way they claimed? Let's talk about Theranos, the scam that didn't just fool people's wallets. It fooled their pride. It fooled their identity. It fooled their need to believe they were standing close to greatness. Here's the pitch in its purest form. Imagine you could test for hundreds of conditions with just a finger prick. Fast, cheap, convenient. No scary needles, no waiting, no expensive lab visits. That pitch is not evil. That pitch is beautiful. Because you're not selling technology, you're selling relief. You're selling the end of fear. You're selling a world where a mom can check her health without losing a day of work, where an elderly person doesn't have to travel and wait and stress, where a sick person gets answers now, not later. And when you sell something like that, you're not just selling a product, you're selling hope. And hope is one of the easiest things to weaponize. Because people don't want to be the person who says, "Actually, I don't think this life-saving miracle is real." Nobody wants to be that guy. Now enter Elizabeth Holmes, young, confident, sharp, unshakable. She had the kind of presence that makes people lean forward when she talks, the kind of confidence that feels like proof. And she didn't just build a company, she built a myth. The black turtlenecks, the deep voice, the "I'm here to change the world" aura. She wasn't trying to look like a normal startup founder. She was trying to look like a historic one. Like, "Don't question me, you're watching history." And that's important, because the strongest scams don't start as scams. They start as stories. And a good story doesn't just convince you. It recruits you. It makes you want to be part of it. And Theranos became that kind of story. A club people wanted access to. A future people wanted early. A bet people wanted to brag about. Here's what you need to understand. Theranos wasn't just saying, "We're working on something." They were saying, "It works, it's here, it's real." They claimed they could run a huge range of tests from tiny samples of blood. But behind the scenes, the technology couldn't reliably do what was being promised. And when reality didn't match the story, they didn't slow down and fix the story. They protected the story. They treated the story like the product. And once you treat the story like the product, everything else becomes negotiable. Truth becomes a detail. Doubts become disloyalty. Questions become threats. From reporting that later unraveled the company, a huge part of the illusion was that Theranos often relied on traditional lab machines for many tests while still presenting results, as if the revolutionary system was doing the magic. Meanwhile, the secret sauce was wrapped in layers of secrecy, controlled access, and you don't get it because you're not supposed to. And look, secrecy isn't automatically a crime. Lots of companies protect trade secrets. But there's a difference between "we can't tell you how it works because it's proprietary" and "we can't tell you how it works because it doesn't work." Theranos played in that fog. They used complexity as camouflage, because the more complicated something sounds, the harder it is for people to admit they don't understand it. And once people feel dumb, they stop asking questions. This is where it gets uncomfortable, because the easiest explanation is, they were greedy. But that's lazy. The more honest explanation is, they were emotionally invested in being right. Here's what Theranos offered powerful people: a front row seat to a revolution, a chance to be early, a story they could tell at dinners, a legacy move, a reputation win, and on top of that, social proof started stacking. Big names joined the orbit. Big partners showed interest. The company looked legitimate because important people acted like it was legitimate. It's a feedback loop. Surely someone already verified it. Surely regulators would stop this. Surely the board wouldn't attach their names to something fake. And that surely is where your skepticism dies. Also, incentives. A lot of people get paid when deals happen, not when truth happens. And if you're an investor or an executive or a partner, sometimes the scariest risk isn't losing money. Sometimes the scariest risk is being the only person at the table who says, "I don't believe this." Because if you're wrong, you look like an idiot. And if you're right, you look like the person who ruined the party. Most people would rather be wrong with everyone else than right alone. That's not evil. That's human. And Theranos understood humans. It's not like there were no red flags. It's just that nobody was paying attention. Let me list a few red flags that, in hindsight, feel like neon signs. Number 1, extreme secrecy. Not we're stealth. More like, you don't get access, you don't get data, you don't get transparency. No 2, no normal scientific validation. For something that's supposed to transform medical testing, the lack of typical open proof should have set off alarms. No 3, returns and progress that felt too smooth. When a technology is genuinely hard, it looks messy in development. It looks like failure, iteration, and weird setbacks. Theranos projected certainty, not curiosity. No 4, intimidation as a business strategy. When journalists and former insiders started questioning the story, the company didn't respond with clarity. It responded with pressure, threats, legal muscle. And again, companies protect themselves. But when a company treats questions like enemies, it tells you something. No 5. The vibe of exclusivity. The "you're lucky to be invited" tone. That one is sneaky, because it doesn't feel like danger. It feels like status. And status is one of the easiest ways to shut off critical thinking. Every scam story has a moment where someone sees the cracks first. With Theranos, there were whistleblowers and insiders who raised concerns, and a journalist who didn't back down. People like Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung are often mentioned because they saw troubling issues and felt the pressure of challenging a powerful story. And what happens to people like that in these environments? They don't get rewarded. They get isolated. They get labeled difficult. They get told they're not mission aligned. And sometimes they get hit with legal threats that are meant to do one thing: make the truth expensive. Because if the truth costs you your career, your savings, your peace, most people will stay quiet. Theranos wasn't just selling a product. It was enforcing a narrative. And the people who challenged the narrative were treated like they were trying to destroy the future. Theranos didn't collapse because someone suddenly got ethical. It collapsed because reality is undefeated. Investigative reporting in 2015 helped break the spell, pulling attention to the gap between the story and what the technology could actually do. Then the dominoes started. Partners backed away. Regulators got involved. The company's credibility started bleeding out in public. And once credibility is gone in a business like that, you can't PR your way back, because the whole business was built on belief, and belief is fragile. Eventually, the legal consequences arrived. Holmes was found guilty on multiple counts and later sentenced to more than 11 years in prison. Balwani was also convicted and sentenced to nearly 13 years. This is the part where people love to say, justice was served. But the truth is, justice doesn't refund time. It doesn't unbreak trust. It doesn't undo fear for patients who got alarming results. It doesn't erase the stress for employees who lived inside a pressure cooker. It doesn't rebuild the savings of people who believed. The prison sentence is an ending, but it's not a repair. This is where the Theranos story stops being business drama and becomes something heavier. Because the real cost isn't just money. It's humiliation. It's that feeling of waking up and realizing, I defended this. I recommended this. I attached my name to this. I ignored the weird feeling in my gut because I wanted to be part of something big. There are victims who lost money, yes, but there are also victims who lost something harder to replace, their ability to trust themselves. And that's the part people don't talk about enough. A scam doesn't only take your cash, it makes you question your judgment. And shame is a quiet prison. I don't want you leaving this story thinking, so never trust anything. That's not the lesson. The lesson is, trust is not a strategy. Here are practical protections, not paranoia, especially for investing in hype-heavy industries. Number 1. If you can't clearly explain how it works, you don't understand the risk. You might still invest, but you should admit, this is belief, not knowledge. Number 2. Verify the core claim independently. Not they have impressive people. Not they have beautiful branding. Not they're valued highly. Verify the claim. No 3. Watch for secrecy that blocks validation. Proprietary is normal. Unverifiable is dangerous. No 4. Beware of charisma plus urgency. If someone is pressuring you to move fast, it's often because time is their enemy. No 5. Incentives matter more than speeches. Ask, who gets rewarded if I believe this? Who gets punished if I ask questions? No 6. If criticism is treated as betrayal, you're not in a company, you're in a cult. And cults don't do due diligence. They do loyalty tests. And my favorite simple rule, a real breakthrough can survive scrutiny. A fragile story can't. Theranos is not just a story about a startup that failed. It's a story about what happens when image becomes more important than truth, when ambition becomes addiction, when changing the world becomes a shield against accountability. And it's a story about something even more uncomfortable. A lot of people didn't believe because they were stupid. They believed because they were human, because they wanted to be early, because they wanted to be right, because they wanted to touch greatness and say, I was there. So here's the line I want you to remember. The most dangerous scams don't look like crimes. They look like certainty. And as of January 2026, Holmes was still making headlines, reportedly asking President Donald Trump to commute her sentence. Whether that happens or not, the bigger truth stays the same. The future doesn't need your blind faith. It needs your questions. Because the people who ask hard questions early, they don't just protect their money, they protect reality.